Sleep now, little star, the night will keep you safe.
Welcome to a history video episode that doesn't want to thrill you. In fact, it wants to gently rock you to sleep. This isn't the kind of story that bursts through the door with sword fights or political coups. No, this is a whisper from the past, the quiet echo of sandals against sun-warmed stones, chaos, and drift into a place that existed over 4,000 years ago. A place where the sky was painted in dust and copper, where cuneiform scribes scratched the day's news onto damp clay, and the air smelled faintly of incense, river mud, and barley stew. This is not about kings and conquests. It's about the woman grinding grain in the pre-dawn silence, the young boy trying to remember his Sumerian verbs, the temple priest who wakes not with urgency, but with ritual, the rhythm of life when the clock was the sun, and a day could pass with only the rustle of palm leaves. In this video, you'll follow the clinking steps of merchants through crowded streets. You'll feel the heat of the brickmakers' kilns. You'll hear the evening songs sung to Ishtar and see the slow turning of the stars that guided both dreams and destinies. Why? Babylon. Because it was one of the first cities to truly breathe, with its massive ziggurats, grand processional streets, and irrigation canals carved with bare hands. Babylon was not just a place on a map, was a heartbeat in human history. And yet, for all its splendor, most Babylonians were just trying to live a quiet life. That quiet life is what this cherishes. So, curl up, let the slow rhythm of clay, cloth, and custom lull you. This is your invitation to a peaceful place. There are no plot twists here, no cliffhangers, just history soft, slow, and sleepy. Close your eyes when you wish. Babylon will still be here, the same as yesterday, waiting for the sun to rise once more. Awakening in the cradle of civilization, nor the jarring buzz of electricity. Orange hue stretching over the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, seeping into reed-thatched homes and mud-brick alleys like a sigh. In this chapter, we will slowly open our eyes to that same light, not through the eyes of a ruler or a general, but through the ordinary people, the ones who shaped Babylon, not through command, but through routine. Before the sun crowned the horizon, a subtle stirring began in the narrow courtyards of family dwellings. The air was cool and earthy. You might smell the remnants of last night's lentil stew, the charcoal gone cold, and hear the rhythmic coo of pigeons waking on thatched rooftops. This was when the city still held its breath. An average Babylonian, let's say, a potter named Enlil would wake at this hour, not out of ambition, but necessity, just the careful rationing of yesterday's labor. They didn't wake alone. The city was a symphony of slow awakenings. The baker's oven roared to life before the stars faded, the smell of barley bread mingling with the early river mist, the silt. Some muttered half-prayers to Shamash, the sun god, hoping for a day without illness or drought. The homes themselves were humble, yet surprisingly sophisticated, made of sun-baked mud bricks. Their walls kept the heat out during the day and warmth in during the cool night. Sometimes slept under the stars to escape the summer heat. Morning in such a home meant shaking off a rough woolen blanket. Rooms were dim, lit only by the gaps in wooden shutters or small openings designed to let air flow but deter animals. Enlil and Ahat would say little as they washed their faces from a shared basin their minds still nestled in the softness of dreams. Their children, if they were old enough to walk but too young to work, would still be curled on mats in the corner, hugging clay dolls or tiny woven goats. As the light grew, so did the sounds. The calls of the date sellers echoed faintly from the streets. Metal pots clanged softly as women prepared simple breakfasts, flat barley cakes, from scratch, often with tools and recipes passed down for generations. There were no written cookbooks in their home. The knowledge lived in hands, preparing offerings that included fruits, oils, and sometimes small animals. These were not moments of awestruck wonder, but rather practiced reverence, like how we brush our teeth or boil our morning tea. Ahat, like most Babylonian women, was industrious. She didn't just tend the home, she helped with weaving, sometimes pottery, and often sold goods in the market herself. Her first task was lighting the hearth, coaxing the embers from last night's fire back to life with straw and breath. She sang a low song, half hymn, half lullaby, not to anyone in particular. His hands, thick with calluses, moved without hesitation as he packed his tools into a leather satchel. If he were lucky, he'd have 2 orders for large water jars today. If he were not, he'd work anyway, shaping the clay while thinking about last year's floods or next week's grain prices. This was a life not of ambition, but of endurance. The streets were narrow, shadowed, and alive with color and chatter. Stray dogs nosed through discarded skins. Children wove through legs, their laughter bouncing off the walls. The scent of oils and perfumes drifted through the air, sold in tiny alabaster jars to the upper class. The kind that lulls rather than jars. It was a city waking up with intention, patience, and quiet purpose. The chapter ends not with a dramatic moment, but with the slow unfolding of sunlight across clay rooftops. Ahat placing a fig in her son's tiny hand. Workshop humming an old lullaby his mother used to sing. And the city vast. Let it be steady, let it be slow. Close your eyes now, if you'd like. The day has only begun. And in Babylon, there's no hurry. The rooster's call in ancient Babylon was not a sharp alarm bell, was on its way. Its cry drifted across courtyards, echoing off baked brick walls, stirring the air between palm trunks and vine-covered alleys. It was never alone. The earth itself seemed to respond with creaks and sighs, doors opening, sandals sliding across gravel, river reeds rustling softly in the warm dawn. Babylon was no stranger to routine. The people lived by the rhythm of the sun, and the sun itself seemed to wake gradually, reluctant to burn, too bright, too fast. This chapter is about those sacred early hours, not just what people did, but what they felt, what it meant to rise. With the stars fading behind you, to greet a world not with ambition. The surface catches gold from the sky and reflects the shapes of women bent with jars on their hips, children crouched on the edges, skimming water with their fingers. It gave them life, and they honored it in quiet ways. Most mornings began not with noise, but with water, water for washing. And not just any water, Euphrates water, blessed by Enki and nurtured by the hands of men who had chiseled canals and ditches for decades. People believed the river carried more than silt and fish. It carried memory. It remembered the first flood, the old gods, the ancient agreements between heaven and earth. A man like Ibsen, he wouldn't need one. The moon gave just enough glow to move by. He'd kneel by his boat, whisper a few words in thanks to Ea, god of water and wisdom, and ease his vessel into the cool current. There was no haste in his hands, only patience, the kind learned through repetition and years of listening to the river's quiet language. While Ibison cast his nets, his wife Shala would be filling a clay pot at the riverbank. Her headscarf would be tied with practiced care, her posture poised with the dignity of someone who has walked this path every day since she could remember. She would not speak unless spoken to, but she might hum a low, steady melody taught by her mother, a song meant to soothe the river spirit, to ensure the pot filled evenly and the walk home remained untroubled. Not far from her children might gather barefoot, tousled and yawning, not yet bound for the temple school, but already soaking in the dawn. They'd toss pebbles, try to outskip each other's throws, giggle when the water jumped or splashed. Their laughter was never loud. Babylonian parents discouraged disruption at dawn. Morning was for the gods and the river, not mischief. But still they played, as children always do. Across the river's bank, the priests began their work. Their robes were clean and ceremonial. Long garments dyed in pale earth tones, threaded with symbols of Ishtar or Marduk, depending on the temple. One priest, old and nearly blind, sat with a shallow bowl in his lap, grinding fragrant herbs into ash. He would later mix it with oil and smear it on temple thresholds, not because it was required, but because it had been done that way for generations. Babylonian rituals were a form of remembering, not innovation, not invention, just sacred remembering. As the sun began its slow rise, its rays fell not just on faces and rooftops, but on hearts. The Babylonians believed the sun was more than a celestial body. Shamash, the sun god, was a living force, a judge and protector, an all-seeing eye that moved across the sky to light truth and scatter darkness. When the light hit the temple walls, when it touched the river's skin, it was like a benediction. Shala, on her way home, would pause for just a second, eyes closed, letting the sunlight warm her eyelids. Not out of superstition, out of connection, the way a modern person might take a long breath in a forest. She absorbed the moment. Her skin, her bones, her spirit knew this moment mattered. By now, the rooster had long since gone silent. Its job was done. The city buzzed gently. Now, markets began to stir. Smoke curled up from clay chimneys. And still, the river moved, always moving, never rushing. Vendors lined the edge of the processional way, arranging fish caught just an hour ago. Next, to them, a young girl unrolled a mat and began stacking small pouches of salt and dried herbs. Her mother arranged them precisely, with a frown of focus, not because they were wealthy merchants, but because she took pride in precision. Every morning they did this, and every morning it mattered. Above them all loomed the ziggurat, its massive staircase, catching light like a beacon. Priests began ascending, one careful footstep at a time, carrying baskets of fruit, vessels of milk, sometimes a lamb, if it was a special day. The steps were worn, grooved from generations of devotion. To walk them was to walk a prayer, but not. Everyone worshipped in temples. For many, the act of worship was lived through the day, in cleanliness, in honesty, in feeding your family, in shaping clay without flaws. These were people who didn't need scrolls, to tell them how to be good. They lived it, quietly, constantly. As the sun climbed higher, the sacredness faded not into irrelevance, but into familiarity. The early golden hours were over, and the world became more practical. But that sacred river still flowed. That rooster's cry still echoed in memory. The rituals of mourning lingered in gestures, the way a woman adjusted her scarf, the way a boy carried a scroll tucked under his arm, the way a fisherman cleaned his nets without ever facing away from the water in Babylon. The start of the day was more than a phase of time. It was a blessing, a transition, a silent conversation with the gods and the land. And no matter how mundane the tasks ahead, there was always this moment to remember, to ground them, to begin from. The sun is now fully up. The clay streets are warm. You may feel the world has become louder, and perhaps it has, but the heart of the morning still beats beneath it all. So, if your eyes are heavy, and the river's rhythm has worked its way into your breath, let sleep return. The rooster will call again tomorrow. The sun will rise again, and the sacred river will never forget. It belonged most of all to the common people, the potters, the bakers, the washerwomen, the scribes, assistants, the shepherds, the stall vendors. They were the breath of the city, the quiet pulse beneath the golden bricks and towering ziggurats. They woke before Babylon fully stirred, not with shouts or commands, but with the gentle rhythm of daily habit. Morning for them was not a fresh start, it was continuity, a familiar return to roles already written by the hands of their parents and their parents before them. In the cool softness, just before the sun's golden edge touched the horizon, the common people rose from beds made of palm mats and straw. Most Babylonian homes were small, 1 or 2 rooms built with baked mud bricks and plastered with clay. The walls held warmth in winter and offered some cool relief in summer. The roofs were flat, and many families often slept there during the hottest parts of the year under the stars. A woman named Luma might have been the first to rise in her home. She stirred quietly, careful not to wake the youngest of her children, curled up under a woven blanket. Her husband slept next to the doorway, his head resting on a folded shawl, one hand on the small wooden staff he used in the fields Luma tied her hair with a piece of cloth and stepped across the courtyard. Lit dimly by the first silver glow of morning dot, she knelt beside the water jar, lifting the lid with practiced fingers. She dipped a small bowl into the cool depths and poured it into a shallow clay basin. Without words, she washed her face, her neck, her arms. Her fingers moved slowly, reverently. It had been carried, drawn by hand from the canal the night before. Each drop mattered. Beside her, the fire pit sat sleeping, a mound of ashes and the faintest orange glow beneath. She reached into the kindling basket, chose the driest twigs, and fed them into the pit. Her breath coaxed the fire to life. A flicker, a crackle, then warmth. As the smoke began to rise, so did the scent of yesterday's wood, earthy and calm. In the next house over, a young boy named Nabu rubbed his eyes awake. He was 8 years old and had only just begun attending the tablet house, the Edaba. He stretched his arms and crept over to the corner where his school satchel, a small cloth pouch, hung from a nail. He did not open it, he only touched it lightly, a reminder that soon, when the morning rituals were complete, he would begin his lessons. His mother called him gently, No harsh voices filled the dawn, only low murmurs, like waves on a quiet riverbank. Families gathered slowly around the hearth. Their first meal was modest. Barley cakes cooked over the stone, perhaps a fig or a spoon of lentils, if there was any leftover stew from the night before. Sometimes the food was shared in silence. Sometimes, if the day promised good fortune, there would be stories retold softly about ancestors who had planted the first barley field, or about the moon goddess who whispered secrets into the ears of those who dreamed near the temple walls. The fire crackled. Clay cups passed from hand to hand. A father might kiss the top of his daughter's head. A brother might offer the last piece of bread to his sibling. The rituals were not grand, but they were sacred. They shaped the soul without ceremony once. Breakfast was finished. The household turned to preparation. Not all at once, and not with urgency. The sun had only just begun to peek over the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the alleyways. Some women took woven baskets and headed toward the market square, where fishmongers and fruit sellers would soon arrange their goods. Men stepped outside with tools slung over shoulders, walking slowly toward the workshops and fields. Some carried small wooden plows, others led donkeys or goats by a thin rope of twisted grass. Before anyone crossed the home's threshold, they paused, not out of superstition, but out of reverence. At the doorframe, many homes had a tiny niche or carved mark where small offerings were left: a pinch of barley flour, a drop of oil, a single fig if one could be spared. This was for the household spirits, the unseen guardians who watched over the family. These offerings were made silently. No chants, no gestures, just presence. Outside the street stirred to life. Chickens clucked, nudging at the dust. Dogs trotted past doorways, their tails low but wagging. Women exchanged greetings with soft smiles, asking about the night's sleep or about an ill child, or simply offering a nod of peace. Children walked together, sandals in hand, their feet brushing the morning's warmth from the cobblestones. As the common people moved through the early light, they did not think of themselves as historical. They were not building empires. They were feeding them, clothing them, holding them together with patience. The grand tales of Babylon's kings would not be possible without these quiet mornings, repeated thousands of times across thousands of humble homes. Luma paused at the edge of the irrigation canal. The water sparkled gently, moving at its own ancient pace. She dipped a small vessel into the current, letting it fill slowly. Behind her, her daughter skipped stones. Her husband lifted his satchel of seed and looked toward the sun, already judging the strength of its heat. There was no rush. The day would unfold as it always did. These rituals, washing, feeding, greeting, gathering, they were the heartbeat of the city. They taught gratitude, they taught patience, and they taught the people that even the most ordinary of mornings could be sacred. As the sun climbed higher, the morning rituals drew to a close. The noise of carts and hammers replaced the whisper of sandals. But inside each person, the calm of morning stayed a little longer. It settled into their bones, followed them through the day, and reminded them silently that the gods watched over those who lived with rhythm, with care, and with quiet devotion. If your eyes are heavy, now is a good time to rest. Imagine the soft rustle of woven fabric, the crackling fire, the low hum of a lullaby sung by someone long forgotten. Babylon does not rush, and neither should you. The sun has risen just high enough to paint the city's walls in honey-colored light. The shadows grow shorter, and Babylon begins to hum. This is the time when the bazaar comes to life to the untrained eye. It may look like any other busy place, a stretch of dusty road flanked by wooden stalls, people moving back and forth, with baskets in hand, voices raised in barter and laughter. But for the people of Babylon, the market was a sacred ritual of its own. It was the center of stories, a crossroads of smells, colors, fabrics, spices, words, and emotion. This chapter follows a single merchant named Arabum, whose life revolved around this sacred street. He was not a wealthy man. He did not own a grand stall or a line of servants. His place in the market was a worn patch of ground near the edge of the fish sellers. But each morning he walked there with the same deliberate steps, carrying his basket of goods, his rolled cloths, and a small clay tablet listing the prices he hoped to get. Arabum lived on the north side of the city, not far from the outer wall. His house was small, shaded by fig trees, with a stone bench outside where his wife often sat to shell beans. He rose just after sunrise, after the fire had been stirred and a piece of barley bread had been pressed into his hand. He kissed his children on the tops of their heads and gave thanks to the household spirits before stepping into the warming morning. The journey to the market was part of the ritual. He passed the same faces each day. The old man with the limp, who fed birds from his lap. The temple girls sweeping the front steps of the shrine to Ishtar. The boys carrying clay jars filled with milk from the countryside. These faces were not strangers. They were pieces of the city, like stones in a wall. As he reached the processional way, the city's grand central avenue, the smell of the market reached him before anything else. Not just one smell, but 1,000 mixed together. Roasted garlic, pickled fish, new leather, sweet dates, crushed mint leaves, the sweat of animals, the perfume of crushed myrrh. Each step brought a new layer. The sound followed, a chorus of voices, a woman calling out the freshness of her honey, a young boy offering samples of figs, a copper bell jingling on a donkey's harness. No one shouted in anger. The market had its own rhythm. People spoke loudly, but not unkindly. There was music in the noise. Arabum reached his corner and sat on a low stool beside a stack of linen he had dyed himself. Pale blue, soft red, and the rare dark purple that fetched the highest coin. He set out small jars of sesame oil, a few combs carved from bone, and 2 small copper mirrors wrapped in cloth. These were his treasures, each one earned with time, skill, and patience. Beside him, a woman sold clay dolls. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her hands were stained with red earth. She nodded at Arabum without speaking. They had shared this space for years. No one had ever said they must, but something about the quiet understanding between them held stronger than any written rule. Customers came and went. A mother with 3 children touched the edge of a linen scarf, then shook her head and smiled, apologizing for not being able to afford it. Arabum only nodded and offered her a comb for free. She hesitated, then accepted it with a quiet blessing be upon you. Later, a man from the southern fields stopped to buy oil for his aging father's joints. He paid in dried dates and a smile. Arabum accepted the trade. In Babylon, money came in many forms, sometimes in silver, sometimes in barley, sometimes in kindness. As the sun climbed higher, the market grew warmer. A vendor poured water onto the dusty ground in front of her stall to settle the rising powder. Chickens darted through the alleyways. Children ran past with armfuls of bread, laughing, bumping into baskets, and getting scolded gently by their mothers. Arabum took a break when the bell at the temple of Shamash rang once, signaling the time between morning and midday. He stood, stretched his back, and walked to a nearby stall where a boy was selling dates soaked in honey. He bought two and sat beneath the shade of a canvas sheet. Around him, the world swayed with heat and slow motion. People fanned themselves with woven palms. Donkeys stood still, eyes half closed. It was the pause, the moment where the market seemed to breathe in. Under that shade, Arabum took a bite of his date. The honey stuck to his teeth. The sweetness filled his mouth and made him close his eyes. For a moment, he was not a merchant. He was a boy again, standing by the river with his father, learning to shape clay, listening to the same market sounds in a younger, softer world. Back at his stall, he sold one of the mirrors to a noblewoman's servant. She didn't speak. She simply pointed and placed 3 silver rings into his hand. Arabum nodded, wrapping the mirror in a cloth as soft as milk. He placed the silver in his pouch without counting. Trust was part of the ritual too. The sun began to lower. The sky shifted from gold to a pale orange. Vendors packed their goods, sweeping away crumbs, wrapping what had not been sold in cloth, and tying ropes around baskets. The market never ended in a rush. It faded gently, like the end of a long song. Arabum stood slowly. His back ached. His feet were tired, but his heart felt calm. He had sold what he could. He had spoken to familiar faces. He had laughed. He had eaten sweet things. And he had listened to the living heart of Babylon, the bazaar. The walk home was quieter. The streets no longer sang. The shadows stretched long. Women called their children inside. Lamps flickered in windows. A hush returned to the city. A peace that only came at the end of the day lived fully at home. Arabum sat on the bench beside his wife. She handed him a piece of bread. His children gathered around, asking about the market. He gave them a few dried figs he had traded for. They squealed with joy. His wife touched his shoulder lightly. He closed his eyes, not to sleep yet, but just to hold the moment. The market was behind him. Tomorrow it would rise again. But for now, he had nothing to sell, nothing to say, nothing to carry. Just silence, just warmth, just Babylon. If your eyelids are heavy, you may close them now. The bazaar has grown quiet. The last cart has rolled away. The last coin has changed hands. The day is done, and peace has returned. Not all mornings in Babylon belonged to bread, markets, and cloth. Some belonged to silence. Some began not with the sounds of the bazaar, but with the soft padding of sandals along cool stone, the faint jingling of a priest's bronze ornaments, and the scent of incense curling upward into the first golden light of the sun. This chapter invites you into the temples of Babylon, not through the grand gates reserved for kings or diplomats, but quietly through the side path, the one used by servants, pilgrims, and those who came only to kneel, to whisper, and to leave unnoticed. The temple did not sleep. not really. Even in the deepest hours of night, there was always someone tending the flame, sweeping the steps, watching the stars from the rooftop. But at dawn, the temple changed. It breathed more deeply. It stretched its stone limbs and invited the city to remember the gods once more. Our journey begins with a young temple attendant named Dagon. He was no high priest, no master of sacred texts. He was a boy of 17, learning slowly, quietly. Each morning, before the stars had fully vanished, Dagon tied his linen robe around his waist, picked up a jar of scented oil, and walked barefoot through the eastern gate of the Temple of Marduk. His first task was simple. He carried the oil up the winding stair that led to the highest shrine, not the grand sanctuary open to the public, but the private room at the very top. It was there that the statue of the god was said to rest, where the air was heavy with silence and reverence. The room was small, not much larger than a home's pantry, but to Dagon it felt like standing inside the sky. He did not speak when he entered. No one ever did. He bowed once, deeply, and placed the jar of oil beside the stone altar. Then he stepped back, letting the early light fall across the floor. That was all, a small offering, a beginning. Back in the courtyard below, the priests were rising. They wore robes embroidered with symbols, stars, rivers, lions, moons, each one representing a divine story, an ancient truth. They did not rush. They walked slowly, heads slightly bowed, their movements quiet and careful. Their day would be long. Their work required steadiness. The gods, they believed, noticed every detail. The first public ritual of the day was the washing of the sacred statues. This was not a hurried act. It was a ceremony in itself. The statues were not seen as mere stone or wood. Washing them was like tending to the gods themselves. One priest would pour warm water from a jug. Another would wipe the statue gently with linen cloths soaked in oil and crushed herbs. These prayers were not for show. They were ancient, repeated in the same rhythm each day. The words learned not just by memory, but by heart. Outside the temple gates, people had already begun to gather, not in crowds. Shawl, a farmer holding a small basket of grain, an old woman clutching a dried fig wrapped in cloth. They came not to demand blessings, but to offer thanks, to light incense, to leave behind tiny gifts and quiet hopes. Inside the temple, Dagon helped prepare these offerings. He placed each one in a special bowl or tray, sorted by kind, oil, bread, fruit, coins. He recorded them on a clay tablet with a stylus, each symbol carved with care. He liked the feel of the clay under his fingertips, still soft, still warm from the fire that had hardened the tablets from yesterday's gifts. One woman approached the gate with tears in her eyes. She said nothing, only handed Dagon a single feather wrapped in a piece of string. He accepted it with a nod and placed it at the base of the altar to Ishtar. No questions were asked. The gods, he had been taught, understood every language, even silence. As the morning passed, the temple filled with smells, not just the sweetness of incense, but the more earthy aromas of wet stone, old clay, and sunlit dust. The candles flickered against high walls. Birds sang from the trees beyond the courtyard. A breeze drifted in through the open gates, carrying the laughter of children from the city streets. And still, within the temple, all remained calm at midday. The The priests gathered in the shade of the inner courtyard. They sat in a half-circle and read aloud from sacred texts written on long scrolls of palm fiber and parchment. These readings were not dramatic. They told of gods who had carved rivers with their fingers, who had whispered into the winds, who had wept stars into the sky. Dagon sat at the edge of the circle, listening. He did not always understand the deeper meanings, but he felt something stir inside him, a gentleness, a belonging, a quiet power that wrapped around the temple walls like the scent of oil. As the sun began to descend, the temple's rhythm slowed. Again, evening prayers were prepared. The final offerings of the day, small cakes shaped like animals, beads carved from bone, sprigs of sacred herbs, were placed on the altars. Lamps were lit, one by one, their flames steady and golden. The temple glowed from within before he left. Dagon walked to the western side of the temple, where the wall opened to the setting sun. Eyes half closed, he breathed in. He felt the warmth on his face. He said nothing. There was nothing more to say. He walked home slowly, the last light of day stretching long shadows behind him. The city was quiet again. People gathered around fires, shared their meals, whispered goodnight to children. The temple remained behind. Him, still glowing, still watching, still listening. Not everyone in Babylon went to the temple. Not everyone offered prayers. But for those who did, it was not about spectacle. It was about rhythm, about remembering, about placing one's small, flickering life beside the eternal flame and feeling, for a moment, less alone. And so, if your eyes are tired now, let them rest. Think of the temple, still standing in silence, bathed in soft light. Think of the boy, placing a feather before the altar. Think of prayers spoken not with voices, but with breath. Babylon sleeps now, but the gods are still listening. The heart of Babylon did not beat only in temples or palaces or markets. It beat within courtyards, shaded by palm trees. It beat in kitchens filled with the soft clatter of clay pots. It beat in lullabies, hummed as the stars climbed overhead. And it beat most powerfully in the women, silent, steady, often unseen, who held the city together, one thread at a time. This chapter is not about great. It is about the women whose names have been forgotten by history, but whose presence was felt in every room, every meal, every act of care. It is about women like Luma, like Ninsin, like Samitu, who rose with the sun not to lead armies. Their hearts in Babylon. A woman's day often began before anyone else stirred. She was the first to hear the sounds of the city waking, a dog barking in the alley, a bird singing near the window, the distant splash of water against a stone basin, with twine or cloth. There was no time to waste. The morning held too much. One of her first tasks was to sweep the courtyard. The air was still cool. Her broom, made of bound reeds, brushed the dust gently. She did not sweep quickly or carelessly. This was not just a chore, it was a kind of prayer. Each sweep, a movement of order. Each step, a soft reminder that her home was sacred ground. In the kitchen, she stirred the fire. Her hands moved without thinking. The fire responded to her like an old friend. With the first flames, she warmed barley cakes over flat stones. She pounded herbs in a mortar. She checked the clay pots lined neatly in a row. Some held chickpeas, others lentils, a few with dried fruit or pieces of salted fish. These supplies were carefully measured. She knew exactly how much her family would need. The younger girls rose next. Daughters helped their mothers with grinding flour, mending clothing, fetching water. Their fingers were swift, their voices soft. Even the smallest task was treated with care. A crooked stitch in a tunic could mean discomfort. A careless wash could ruin cloth. Babylonian women took pride in precision. Outside, when the market called, they carried their baskets balanced gracefully on their hips. They walked not hurriedly, but with purpose, the chest in respect. They traded not only goods, but stories. A neighbor's child had fallen sick. Another woman's husband was gone to the fields longer than usual. News traveled through glances, through whispers, through gentle hands touching. And armed women were not only caretakers, they were craftswomen. Some wove cloth in the cool shade of porticos. Their looms stretched wide, and their threads were dyed with indigo and ochre and ash. The sound of the loom, the gentle clack, the rhythmic pull, was like a lullaby for the soul. Others shaped clay into lamps or dishes or dolls. They carved names into the soft earth. Sometimes they sang while they worked, were healers. Their knowledge of herbs, roots, and oils was passed down from mother to daughter. They knew which leaves too steep for fevers, which oils to rub into aching joints, which stones to warm and place against a weary back. Their hands were not trained in royal schools. Of many homes was the woman's touch, not in the grand sense of decoration or wealth, but in the way the space felt. A pot placed just so, a mat repaired with care, a child's toy made from scraps of cloth. These were not luxuries, they were offerings. Sometimes, when the house was quiet and the sun high in the sky, a woman would sit in the shade with her child asleep on her lap. Before her, she might remember the way her mother's hands smelled like bread and ash. She might think about the day she first carried water as a girl, or the night she became a mother for the first time, when the stars seemed to watch over her like old friends. Women in Babylon were not always free. They had roles and rules and duties, but within those quiet walls, they built entire worlds. They knew how to make little things sacred. They knew how to carry joy in the corners of their aprons. They knew how to hold grief in silence and still wake the next morning to sweep the courtyard once more. At festivals, women danced in circles, their hair woven with flowers. They clapped their hands and sang to the gods of harvest and love. These were not shows of performance. They were expressions of life. Their joy was not loud, but it was rooted deep in temples. Women also served. Some became priestesses, tending to sacred fires, learning the songs that called down blessings. These women were trained not only in ritual, but in poetry, in dream interpretation, in the art of listening. They were the city's quiet prophets, reading not the stars, but the sighs of those who came to pray in love. 2. Babylonian women held quiet power and promises of return. One tablet found centuries later reads simply, "May your feet find the path home quickly. The house is full of your absence." Such a small sentence, but such a deep ocean behind it. As the day faded, women returned home. They bathed children, folded cloths, stirred evening meals. They lit lamps with quiet prayers and tucked their families into sleep. They were often the last to sleep, the last to eat, the last to rest. But before they closed their eyes, many whispered to the gods, not long prayers, just one or two words, sometimes only a breath, a name, a memory, a wish, and in the silence of their homes, the gods listened tonight as Babylon sleeps. Think of them, the women, the hands that shaped the bread, the fingers that stitched the linen, the voices that told stories under the stars. Their strength was not made of steel. It was made of repetition, of gentleness, of patience. And so, if your heart is heavy, let it be lightened by their grace. If your eyes are tired, let them close. With the knowledge that even in the oldest cities, it was the women who kept the fire warm. The night is deep, the air is still. Babylon dreams, and within it the women rest, strong, quiet, and eternal. In the soft folds of Babylon's daily life, not all work was done with tools or baskets or fire. Some work was done in silence, with a reed pen and a lump of clay. The scribes of Babylon did not shout in the streets or build walls with their hands. They shaped language. They recorded the breath of the city, its laws, its prayers, its trades, its dreams, all into lines pressed into still wet earth. This chapter takes us into that quiet world, a world where noise was replaced by patience, where stories were not told out loud, but carved into history, one stroke at a time. The scribe we follow is named Belatu. He is not old, but he walks with the slow steps of someone who carries a deep respect for time. Each morning, before the city grows too loud, he enters the tablet house, a narrow room shaded by stone, filled with the soft smell of baked clay and dry reeds. He greets no one with loud words. The others do not greet him loudly either. They nod, they smile with their eyes. In this space, voices are hushed, like inside a temple. The scribes sit at low benches, their backs straight, their feet bare. The air is still, touched only by the faint rustle of linen and the quiet tapping of styluses against clay. Belatu finds his seat, takes a small bowl of wet clay, and begins kneading it gently in his hands. The clay is smooth, cool. It responds, like something alive. He rolls it into a palm-sized tablet, flattens it, and runs his fingers over its surface until it is even. Only then does he begin. His reed stylus is trimmed to a perfect point. With it, he begins pressing tiny marks into the clay, wedge-shaped lines, dots, angles, each one a fragment of sound, a sliver of meaning. The script is cuneiform, the language of records and memory. Each stroke is deliberate. There is no rushing in this work. To rush is to risk error. The words were first sung by a priest many years ago. They describe the sun god rising over the eastern mountains, his light falling upon the faces of the just. The hymn is not just praise, it is protection. The belief is that by writing it again, the blessing continues. He copies line by line, the words unfolding like a quiet river. He does not look up. The room around him is still. Other scribes are working on lists, shipments of grain, tallies of sheep, names of those who gave offerings to the temple. A young apprentice nearby is practicing letters on a scrap piece, his hands shaking, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Belatu pauses to let the clay rest. He sets the tablet aside, lets it dry just a little, then turns to another, a half-baked tablet covered in writing from the day before. He reads it over slowly, each line a path back to a conversation, an agreement. The smell of warm bread drifts in pay. Inside, the world is still language, still listening, still learning. There is something sacred in the way Bella II works, not because the words are religious, though many are, but because of the care. Every mark is a bridge between sound and silence. He writes not just for now, but for later, for someone, somewhere, who will one day hold the same tablet, feel its weight, run their finger along its edge, and know that someone once sat exactly as they do now, writing. Later in the day, a woman enters the tablet house. She carries with her a small clay envelope, a folded piece of hardened clay, sealed with a thumbprint. She hands it to Bella II without speaking. He cracks it open carefully. Inside is a letter, a message from her husband, who works in the far fields by the southern canal. He has sent a list of tools he needs, and a few words to his wife. He says he misses her cooking. He says the river is high. He says he dreams of home. Bella II writes her response on a fresh tablet. She speaks slowly. He listens. Her words are not poetic, but they carry weight. She says the children are healthy. The goat is giving milk. She prays for his safety. When she leaves, he seals the tablet with a piece of twine and presses her thumb into the soft clay. A record of love, quiet, eternal. As the sun begins to lower, the scribes stretch their hands and place the completed tablets onto flat trays. These will be taken to the kiln, fired until they harden like stone. Once baked, they will last for centuries. It is a kind of immortality, not for the scribe, but for the words. Before leaving, Bella II places his stylus beside his bench. He washes his hands in a bowl of scented water. He touches his chest lightly, a gesture of respect for the written word, for the gods of wisdom and learning. Then he steps outside. The light is golden. The shadows are long. Bella II passes the temple of Nabu, god of writing and knowledge. He pauses for a moment, offers a silent word of thanks, not for glory, just for the chance to write again tomorrow. At home, he sits quietly near the hearth. His wife gives him a small cup of warm milk mixed with honey. The children climb into his lap, asking him to draw the symbol for lion, for moon, for water. He draws them gently in the dirt floor with his finger. They giggle, try to copy him, and fall asleep soon after. He watches them a moment, their tiny breaths steady. Then he lies back, closes his eyes, and dreams not of temples or kings, but of smooth clay, soft light, and the music of lines pressed into silence. And now, if your eyes are growing heavy too, you may rest here. Let the stylus fall from your fingers. Let the clay dry in peace. The words have been written. The fire is low. Babylon sleeps. And so can you, far from the noise of temple bells and the crowded steps of the marketplace. The true heartbeat of Babylon was growing quietly underfoot, beneath the vast, endless sky, where rivers carved their way through sun-warmed earth. The farmers of Babylon worked slowly, steadily, in rhythm with the land. Their names were rarely etched into stone. Their voices were not raised in the courts, but their hands fed a civilization. This is the story of one such man. His name is Teramu. His life was simple, but simplicity does not mean smallness. The kind of quiet you feel before the wind stirs the leaves, before even the birds begin to sing. Teramu woke when the stars still shimmered softly. He opened his eyes to the cool breath of dawn drifting through the open shutters of his small clay home. The roof above him was made of reeds and mud, patched many times over. Beside him, his wife stirred gently. Neither of them spoke. There was no need for words just yet. Silence, in these early hours, was sacred. He sat up slowly. His body was strong but tired, built from years of pulling, lifting, walking. He wrapped a worn tunic around his shoulders and stepped outside. His feet touched the cool dust. Overhead, the sky was deep indigo, the first blush of light just beginning to creep above the flat horizon. Before anything else, he stood and looked toward the fields. Even from here, he could sense them. The long rows of barley, the broad leaves of flax, the narrow trails carved by oxen hooves. He closed his eyes for a moment, not in prayer exactly, more like gratitude. Back inside, his wife was already preparing a morning meal. A small fire crackled. Their daughter, just 10 years old, rubbed her eyes and helped shape flat barley cakes to cook over the hot stones. Breakfast was humble but comforting. A small bowl of lentils, warm and soft, a piece of bread, torn and dipped into oil. Teramu ate slowly, letting each bite linger. He did not rush. Farmers know better than anyone. All things grow in their own time. After eating, he kissed his wife's forehead, ruffled his daughter's hair, and gathered his tools. A wooden plow, a curved sickle, a coil of rope. These were not just instruments. They were extensions of him, shaped by use, repaired by hand. His donkey waited patiently outside, munching at the dried stalks near the wall. Teramu placed a bundle of twine across its back and walked beside it, not riding, but guiding. The two of them moved through the quiet city edge, where homes thinned out and the air grew sweeter. Soon the city fell away and the world opened into golden fields and wide, dreaming canals. This was the land between the rivers, the gift of the Tigris and Euphrates. Here, the soil was soft and rich, darkened by the floods that came each season. The water nourished everything. Without it, Babylon would be dust. Teramu began his work not with force, but with rhythm. The soil peeled open, row after row. He moved in long, graceful arcs. His breathing matched the motion. There was no urgency, no shouting, only repetition. The earth responded best when treated with patience. Later, he sowed seeds, tiny barley grains slipping from his fingers like sand. He scattered them with care, whispering something each time his hand lifted. Some farmers spoke to their seeds, not because they expected answers, but because it felt right. It felt respectful. By midday, the sun stood high, casting white light across the flat land. Their figures moved like slow dancers across the earth. As he rested, he thought of the seasons, of last year's floods, and the year before when the locusts came. Farming was never secure. Each harvest was a mixture of faith and labor, a gamble placed in the hands of sun, water, and chance. But Teramu did not fear this. He had learned long ago, a farmer's job is not to control, it is to care, to offer what he can and accept what returns. When the shadows grew long again, he returned to his village. The donkey walked slower now, and so did he. His muscles ached, his skin glowed with dust and sweat, but his heart was light. He had done what he could. The earth had been tended. Tomorrow would come in its own time. Back home, his wife was grinding herbs for the evening meal. Their daughter was helping carry water from the well. Teramu sat down on the floor, leaned back, and closed his eyes. His wife placed a damp cloth across his forehead. He murmured thanks. Again, no big speeches, just presence. That night they ate stew with lentils and garlic. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the stars blinked into being one by one. His daughter climbed into his lap, holding a small piece of broken pottery she had found near the canal. He told her it might have once belonged to a queen. She giggled and tucked it into her tunic like treasure. Before bed, Teramu stepped outside. The sky was endless. The fields, though dark now, still called to him. He knew them by feel, by scent, by sound. The wind whispered across the barley. Somewhere, a frog chirped near the water. He knelt briefly, touched the soil near his doorway, and let his fingers linger. The land was tired, like him, but it was also full of promise, and so was he. If your eyes are heavy now, rest them gently. Let the field stretch wide around you. Let the wind carry the scent of barley. Let the silence fall. The farmer sleeps, the earth dreams, and so can you. While Babylon was a city of gods and kings, markets and temples, rituals and rules, there was another melody playing softly beneath it all. A lighter rhythm, full of laughter and running feet, of pebbles thrown into water and dolls made from clay. This is the sound of children, the smallest citizens of Babylon, whose joy gave the great city its beating heart. This chapter follows their world, a world not of politics or priesthood, but of games and wonder, and the warmth of a parent's hand meant more than the richest spice in the cool light of morning as the grown-ups swept courtyards and stirred cooking pots. The children began their day too, not with work, but with curiosity. Their sandals were often half-tied or missing altogether. Their robes were patched and stained from yesterday's play, and their faces always were full of questions. One child, little Lila, lived in a modest clay home near the southern gate. She was 6 years old and could already braid reeds faster than her older brother. Each day, after eating a piece of flatbread dipped in honey water, she would run into the narrow street, her fingers sticky and her eyes wide. She would call out for her friend, Marduk, a shy boy who always carried a carved wooden lion tied to his belt. Together they joined other children, 4, 6, maybe 10 in all, and formed a little world of their own. No rules were written. No grown-up needed to tell them how to begin. The city was their map, the alleys, their rivers, the stone walls, their castles. One of their favorite games was called Follow the Star. One child closed their eyes, and the others left tiny pieces of pottery or colored pebbles in a trail through the neighborhood, beneath water jugs, beside temple steps, behind fig trees. When the Star Watcher opened their eyes, sometimes just the joy of finding. Sometimes they played House of the Gods, pretending one child was a high priest, another a king, the rest temple servants or palace guards. They used woven mats as robes, clay bowls as altars. Their voices grew grand, mimicking the chants they had heard from afar. But always, their games ended with giggles and someone tripping over their own tunic. Not all play was noisy. Some children sat for hours near the edge of the canals, dipping their toes into the cool water. They built cities in the mud, carving roads, placing sticks for houses, floating bits of leaf as boats. They watched insects skim across the surface. Fathers paused from work to share a plum or lift a tired child onto their shoulders. Children were not pushed away in Babylon. They were part of the day. Their presence reminded the city to stay young, to breathe, to laugh, to hope. In the heat of the afternoon, others gathered in clusters and listened to stories told by grandmothers with silver in their hair. These stories were not written. They lived in the breath and memory tales of lion-hearted boys and clever girls who outwitted demons, of the characters in the dirt with their fingers. They asked questions, interrupted, gasped, and sometimes, when the story was about a brave child just like them, they smiled quietly, imagining their own name in the legend. Toys in Babylon were often made at home, dolls carved from wood or molded from clay, their faces painted with simple expressions, balls made of stitched fabric filled with seeds, spinning tops turned smooth from use. Each toy had a story. "My mother made this," a child might whisper proudly, or "This lion protects me when I sleep." Evenings brought slower joy. As the light softened, families gathered on rooftops or in courtyards. The children played. Soft games, guessing games, or finger rhymes passed from cousin to cousin. Older boys sometimes sat apart, carving little animals from scraps of wood. The younger ones leaned against their mother's legs, asking, "What was I like when I was a baby?" and smiling at the answers. On certain nights, when the moon was high and round, families walked to the edge of the river. They brought bread, lanterns, and songs. The children splashed in the shallows, threw rocks, to see who could make the biggest ripple, or lay on the warm grass and counted stars. Some believed that if you made a wish with your eyes closed while the moon reflected in the water, it would surely come true. And sometimes children had quiet days, days when they watched their mothers with curious eyes or helped their fathers stack grain sacks. They weren't told, "Go away." They were told, "Come, hold this, or you try." Slowly, gently, Babylon raised its next generation, not with pressure, but with presence. Of course, children cried too. They scraped knees. They lost toys. They argued. But even these small storms passed like the summer wind. A hug, a bowl of dates, a lullaby. These were the medicine at night. When the city grew quiet and the lamps flickered low, children nestled into soft mats, often beside siblings, sometimes with a doll in one hand and the other wrapped tightly around a parent's finger. They closed their eyes to the sound of whispered blessings, words passed down for generations, spoken not loudly, but close to the ear. "Sleep, little moon. Sleep like the barley beneath the soil. The stars will stay awake for you, their dreams light, their breaths soft. So now, as you listen, if your eyes are beginning to close too, imagine yourself among them, sitting by the canal, feet in the water, or lying in a warm home, the night air sweet and still. The games are done. The toys rest. The stars are watching. Sleep. Well, little dreamer of Babylon, Babylon, the city of gods and gardens, of scholars and scribes. It lived in sound, in rhythm, in footsteps and handclaps. When the sun dipped low and lamps flickered in every doorway, Babylon became a city of music, not grand and thundering, but soft, warm, pulsing, like a heartbeat beneath the hush of evening This chapter takes us not to the throne room or the temple court, but to the courtyards, rooftops, and shaded plazas, where people gathered not to debate or sacrifice, but simply to feel, to celebrate, to remember the joy that rises quietly when hands move together in time, when voices sing, not for performance, but for peace. Let us begin with a small street, narrow, winding, familiar only to its people. Here, as the final light of day leans against the walls, music begins, not from a grand harp or an orchestra of royal instruments, but from a boy with a small lyre carved by his uncle. He plucks the strings gently. The sound is warm, like water stirred by fingertips. A girl nearby begins tapping a slow rhythm on a clay pot. Another child joins, clapping in time. This is how it often began, not as a ceremony, but as a whisper. A heartbeat rising, families stepped out of their homes, carrying stools, bowls of dates, cups of sweet beer. The children danced barefoot, their shadows stretching long across the dusty earth. No one directed them. No one told them how. They spun in circles. They laughed. They jumped and stumbled and began again. Their joy was its own kind of song in the center. An older woman raised her voice in a tune passed from her grandmother's grandmother. The melody swayed like reeds in the wind. Her voice cracked in places, not because she lacked strength, but because the song was ancient, too big for just one throat to carry alone. Others joined in, humming first, then singing, and slowly the courtyard became a choir. The instruments were few but full of soul. A framed drum made from goatskin, a flute carved from river reeds, finger cymbals tied with string. No two sounded alike. No two nights felt the same. But always the rhythm soothed the bones, called the heart to rise, to remember joy. Not all music was loud. Some evenings, when the moon was high and the air heavy with jasmine, people gathered quietly. A lone harpist played by the canal's edge. Couples sat close, not speaking. The strings shimmered like starlight, each note stretching into the night. Like a thread, one song told of a woman who waited for her lover beyond the river, her lamp never going out. Another was about a child lost in the reeds who sang his way home. The lyrics were simple, but when sung slowly, with eyes half closed and breath full of memory, they carried more weight than poetry ever could. Dancing, too, came in many forms. Some danced in wild joy, clapping hands, stomping feet, scarves twirling like birds in flight. Others moved slowly, swaying gently, eyes to the ground, arms outstretched like wheat caught in the wind. A quiet kind of ecstasy, a prayer written in movement. At festivals, dance took on new energy. Lanterns were lit along every wall. Garlands of dried flowers and colored cloth hung from roof to roof. The drums came out bigger, deeper, with rhythms that made even the shyest feet move. Women danced in circles, anklets ringing, their laughter louder than the music. Men danced in lines, stamping the earth, lifting their arms as if reaching for the sky. Sometimes a dancer would move alone in the middle, eyes closed, body loose, turning slowly to a rhythm only they could hear. The crowd would hush, watching, not with judgment, but with awe, because in that moment they knew something sacred was passing through. Even during hardship, drought, illness, war, music remained, perhaps softer, perhaps slower, but always there. At funerals, flutes played, long, aching notes like tears falling through air. At births, drums whispered promises to the new soul just arrived. At weddings, the songs rose like birds at sunrise, lifting everyone, even the tired, even the old. And there were lullabies. Oh, the lullabies of Babylon. Mothers sat cross-legged, with babies in their arms. Fathers sang under their breath, while rocking hammocks gently. The lullabies weren't just for children. They were for the singers to reminders that everything hard would soften, that night would pass, that stars would always return. One such lullaby went like this. Sleep now, small bird, the fig tree bends for you. Sleep now, Riverstone, the water sings you home. And another. Close your eyes, my barley seed, the field is warm. The wind is sweet. The lion dreams beside your bed, and Ishtar watches overhead. These songs were not written down. They were given by memory, wrapped in the breath of love, passed like a thread from mouth to ear, from hand to hand. And still, thousands of years later, if you listen closely, you might hear the echo of them, not in the noise of cities, but in the stillness just before sleep. Music in Babylon was not a luxury. It was not decoration. It was necessity, like water, like warmth. It tied people to one another. It tied them to their gods, to the earth, to their ancestors, and to themselves. Tonight, as your body grows still and your breath begins to slow, imagine the sounds of Babylon's music rising gently through the air. A drum, steady and low, a flute, soft and longing, a voice, cracked and beautiful, singing not to impress, but to soothe. Let your thoughts dance slowly. Let your spirit sway. The music never stopped. It just became quiet enough to dream by dot. And now, if your eyes are heavy, you may close them. The celebration is over. The lamps are low. The final notes have floated into the stars. Babylon sleeps. And so, little listener, should you. The markets of Babylon did not wake with sudden noise. They stirred like the breath before a sigh. They stretched open slowly with the sun woven into the hush of morning. If temples were the city's spirit and fields its body, the marketplace was its breath, constant, soft, rising and falling with the pulse of each day. This chapter takes you there, not as a traveler with coin, but as someone drifting gently through the scene, carried by the rhythm of voices and the warmth of the early light. It begins with a soft sound, a broom sweeping dust from the worn stones, a woman unrolling her reed mat, the creak of wooden carts being pulled into place, the first birds overhead watching from the palm trees that lined the square. And then, slowly, the market opens its eyes. Imagine yourself walking through it. The light is golden, filtered through linen awnings. The air smells of baked bread, sweet dates, warm spices, and clay. A breeze dances between the stalls, carrying laughter, a child's giggle, the gentle clinking of copper. You pass a woman arranging pomegranates in a neat row, each one red and full, like drops of sun. Beside her, a boy ties bundles of fresh mint and basil, their fragrance sharp and clean. You pause to watch him for a moment. He doesn't see you. His eyes are on his hands, making sure the twine holds tight. Next is a potter, sitting cross-legged on a mat. His fingers are stained with dust. He turns a clay bowl in his palm, carving soft grooves with a bone tool. Behind him, shelves are filled with bowls, lamps, small statues of birds and gods. None are perfect. That's what makes them beautiful. Each one bears the quiet signature of touch. Further along, a spice merchant opens tiny jars. He leans over each one, breathing deeply. Cinnamon, cumin, coriander, ground tamarind, powdered garlic. Some of these spices came from far beyond the rivers, carried by donkey and boat. When he speaks to a customer, his voice is low and kind. This one, he says, pointing to a golden powder. This one smells like the sun. He offers you a pinch. The scent is warm, earthy, comforting. There are weavers too. They spread their cloth across wooden frames, stripes of indigo and ochre, patterns of fish and palms and zigzag rivers. The cloth flutters in the wind. A girl stands beside her mother, choosing a piece for a new dress. Her fingers linger over the threads like she's touching water. And there are storytellers. One sits on a blanket near the edge of the square. Children gather around her. Her voice is soft but full. She tells of a turtle who outwitted a lion, of a star who fell in love with a well. Her words come with hand gestures and pauses, and each time she says, "and then." The children lean. In eyes wide, merchants walk past with baskets of figs and tamarinds on their heads. A butcher calls out that today's goat is especially tender. A scribe sits beneath a fig tree, writing letters for those who cannot read or write, messages. Two faraway sons, two cousins in other cities. His reed pen scratches slowly, carefully, and beside him, a wax tablet lies ready for sealing. You sit for a while on a stone bench and watch the world move gently past. Nobody is in a hurry. Even in trade, Babylon teaches patience. A woman barters for a necklace made of blue beads. Her voice is firm, but never sharp. She smiles when the deal is done. The merchant wraps the necklace in linen and ties it with thread, placing it into her hand as if offering a gift. Behind you, a man plays a flute made of bone. The sound is soft and winding, like a snake weaving through air. Two children begin to dance, not with skill, but with joy. They spin until they fall, giggling onto the warm ground. By mid-morning, the market is full, but not crowded. The air is filled with the soft murmur of voices, overlapping but never clashing. You hear many languages: Akkadian, Sumerian, Aramaic. In Babylon, the market speaks all tongues. It welcomes all feet. Some people come not to buy, but simply to see. An old man walks slowly from stall to stall, greeting the merchants by name. They all know him. He never buys much, but always leaves with a story or a joke or a memory. The temples are nearby, their ziggurats rising like mountains in the distance. Sometimes a priest walks through the market to bless the food stalls, not with fire or oil, but with a simple touch of the hand and a few whispered words. A wedding procession passes, not large, just a young couple walking together, surrounded by family. People move aside and clap gently. Someone hands them a date. Someone else throws rose petals. The music swells for a moment. A drum, a tambourine, then fades back into the rhythm of the day. And still, the market breathes. A woman fans herself. With woven reeds, a boy naps beneath a table. A cat wanders between jars of olives and cheese wheels, unnoticed but welcomed. Eventually, the sun reaches its highest point. The air turns warm and soft. Merchants begin to slow. Bread is wrapped. Spices are covered. Shoppers return home. baskets full, voices quieter. You stay just a little longer. The square is almost empty now, but a few people linger, not for business, but for comfort. A mother hums as she ties her baby onto her back. A man drinks water from a clay cup, pours a little onto the ground, in thanks. A dog sleeps in the shadow of a cart, and then the market exhales once more and closes its eyes. Not forever, just until tomorrow, because the market is not just a place, it is a breath, in and out, a song of everyday life, a gentle reminder that beauty is not only in grand palaces or golden statues, but in the smell of herbs, in the texture of cloth, in the touch of a hand passing fruit to another. And as you leave the market, now the sound fades behind you. You carry no coins, no bundles, only memory, only peace. The stones beneath your feet are warm. The sky overhead is wide, and your heart, like Babylon, is full. Now, if your body is still and your mind is quiet, let this market live in your dreams. Let its voices become whispers in the wind. Let its colors melt into your sleep. The market rests, and so should you, in a city of stone and spirit, where kings issued decrees and merchants weighed gold. There existed another kind of power, quieter, softer, but no less vital. This was the power of healing, of those who worked not with weapons or words, but with herbs, hands, and the hush of compassion. The healers of Babylon, they were not always called doctors. Sometimes they were known as wise women, or herb singers, or boners. They did not wear crowns or carry scrolls. But when a child cried in the night, or a man clutched his side in pain, it was their doors people came to first. This chapter takes you into their world, a world of soft footsteps, warm hands, and eyes that listened. Our guide is a woman named Ninlil. She is neither young nor old, but timeless in the way rivers. Her home lies near the temple gardens, shaded by fig trees and perfumed by the wind carrying mint and anise. Her day begins before the sun has fully risen, not because she must, but because she chooses to meet the silence before the world wakes. She kneels beside her herb bed, whispering a small prayer to the plants as her fingers move through the leaves, not for superstition, but for gratitude. Healing begins not with potions, but with respect. She gathers a few stalks of sweet fennel, a handful of thyme, some leaves of wormwood. Each has its use to soothe the stomach, calm the breath, ease the fever. She carries them gently in a reed basket, their scents mingling into something soft and kind. Inside, her home is simple, a clay floor, low shelves filled with jars and bowls, mortars, and pestles carved from smooth stone, scrolls of ancient recipes passed down by voices, not ink. Some of her knowledge came from her mother, some from her dreams. By mid-morning, her first visitor arrives, a young boy, his foot swollen from a fall. His mother carries him, worry heavy in her eyes. Ninlil says nothing at first. She kneels, smiles at the boy, and touches his ankle with 2 fingers. Her hands are warm. Her voice, when she speaks, is quieter than the wind. Just the earth, reminding you to be gentle with yourself. She places the boy on a cushion, unwraps the cloth, and prepares a poultice of crushed calendula and honey. As she works, she hums, not a song with words, just a soft tune that seems to come from nowhere. The boy watches her, wide-eyed, as if she is some kind of magician. But she is no magician. She is a listener, a watcher, a student of the body and its whispering ways. When the treatment is done, she gives the mother a small jar, twice a day, a warm cloth, and a kiss. Kisses help more than people know. They leave calmer, and she returns to her work. Next comes an old man with coughing fits. He sits slowly, wheezing into his sleeve. Ninlil listens to his breath, not with stethoscopes, but with silence. She lights a small brazier, adds a handful of herbs, eucalyptus, myrrh, crushed pine. The smoke rises gently, curling in the air. He breathes it in. Slowly, he begins to ease. Your lungs are tired, she says. They just want to be heard. He nods, eyes closed, and rests in the corner for a while. Outside, the city moves on. Bells ring. Merchants shout. But inside her home, time slows. There is a girl with sleeplessness, a woman with grief that feels like fire in her chest, a man who says his thoughts are heavy and dark, and he doesn't know why. For each, Ninlil has a treatment, not always from a jar, but sometimes from a story, a question, or the silence between two people. Because not all pain is in the bones. Some aches live in the soul to those. She offers a tea brewed from night, petals sipped slowly beside a lamp, or a stone warmed in the sun, placed over the heart, or a lullaby sung in a language the listener doesn't need to understand. By evening, her basket is empty, her hands stained with roots and resins, her heart full. She steps outside, looks at the sky turning amber, and closes her eyes. The wind brushes her cheek like an old friend. Tomorrow, someone else will knock. A mother with a colicky baby, a potter with aching wrists, a farmer who dreams of falling and can't sleep. She will greet them all with the same hands, the same herbs, the same quiet promise. You are not alone. In Babylon, healing was not just science. It was care. It was attention. It was remembering that each body carries stories, and that some stories want only to be heard. Tonight, as the city folds into silence, and lamps flicker in quiet homes, the healers rest to dot their jars are sealed, their scrolls rolled up, their hands, now still, hum with the memory of touch, and you, too, may rest. Let your breath settle. Let your aches drift into sleep. The healer's song is still singing softly inside you. Sleep now, dear listener. You are safe. There is a kind of peace in building. Not the loud kind, not the thunder of hammers, or the cracking of wood, but a quiet peace, the kind that lives in repetition, in the lift of one stone, then another, in the way dust falls when shaped by hands that know the weight of earth. In Babylon, where gods ruled from ziggurats and kings sat on golden thrones, there were no temples, no palaces, no roads without the builders. And yet, most of their names have been forgotten, their footsteps worn away, their voices lost to time. But this chapter is for them. It begins before the sun, before the sky even blushes with light. In a quiet alley near the northern gate, a man named Etana ties his sandals, shoulders his tools, and steps into the dim stillness of morning. He carries no sword, no scroll, only a chisel, a rope, and a jar of water tied with cloth. Etana is one of many, hundreds, perhaps, but to him, his work is not just labor, it is rhythm, it is order, it is service to something larger than himself. Builders of Babylon do not march, They gather slowly, one by one, two by two, near the work sites. A temple wall, a road by the canal, a new arch for a merchant's house. Their voices are quiet, their movements simple. They greet each other with nods, with shared water, with calm. Etana's project this month is a wall, not a grand palace. Wall, but one that lines a public path where children play and goats wander and old men sit to talk in the afternoon shade. A plain wall, but still important. He begins by examining the foundation. Each morning he does this. He touches the base stones with both hands, checks for settling, for cracks, for shifting beneath. Only when satisfied does he begin the day's lifting. He and his fellow workers lift sun-dried bricks from a neat stack. The bricks are warm from yesterday's sun, dusty but strong. They carry them in pairs, walking slowly to the rising line of the wall. The bricks are placed, not thrown. The hands are steady. The fingers know. Mortar is mixed nearby. Straw, clay, ash, thick, cool, and wet. A boy stirs it with a stick, humming a song about rain. Etana spreads it between each layer of bricks, like butter, smoothing with his fingers, shaping with a flat stone. The wall grows slowly, a hand's height per day, no more. But there is no rush. Babylon was not built in speed. It was built in breath, in steady exhale, in patience. Nearby, other builders work on columns. They carve grooves into soft stone, marking the same line again and again. One holds the chisel. One strikes gently with a mallet. The sound, tap, 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 becomes music. Not loud, not fast, just steady, like a heartbeat. Some of the workers are young, still learning. They ask questions. They wipe sweat from their brows. Etana answers, not with lectures, but by showing. See here, he says, placing his hand on a crooked edge. Feel this. Let the stone guide you. Don't fight it. There is something sacred in the way the builders speak to the materials, not with words, but with care. Around midday, the sun climbs high. The air grows thick. Tools are set aside. The workers gather in shade, beneath half-built arches, under cloths stretched across poles. They sit on bricks. They share water, dates, bread wrapped in palm leaves. They don't talk much. They chew. Slowly, they wipe their hands. They breathe. Some close their eyes and drift into half-sleep, backs resting against cool stone. Others murmur quietly about their children, their neighbors, their aching joints. When the break is done, they return, not with groans, but with the same quiet determination. Etana runs his hand over the new bricks. The wall is taller now. He smiles not because it's finished, but because it's growing. Growth is enough. Toward the evening, the day begins to fold itself closed. Tools are washed, ropes coiled, bricks covered to keep the dew off. The men stretch their backs, roll their shoulders. Some laugh, some sing. Etana lingers a little longer. He touches the wall once more, runs his fingers along the seam. There's a small imperfection, a brick laid just slightly off-center. He considers adjusting it, then smiles. It's good, he says softly. Let the wall breathe, because perfection was never the goal. Durability, usefulness, balance, that is what mattered. Back home, his daughter greets him at the door with a flower she made from reeds. He places it on the table beside his tools. His wife serves lentils and rice. They eat quietly, the scent of cumin in the air. His hands are tired. His legs ache, but his heart is still, still and warm. He doesn't speak of the wall at dinner. There is no need. The wall speaks for itself, brick by brick, to those who pass by, to those who lean against it when tired. Two children who press small hands to its surface as they play. That night he washes with a cloth soaked in lavender water. He lies on a reed mat. The moon filters in through the shutters. His wife asks, "How was the day?" Etana closes his eyes. "It rose," he says, "like always," and then he sleeps. In Babylon, every structure told a story, not of kings, not of gods, but of hands, of dust, of sweat, of repetition, of care. A story written not in letters, but in lines of stone. Even the great ziggurat, Etemenanke, the stairway to heaven, stood not because a king commanded it, but because hundreds of builders returned, day after day, to shape it, quietly, softly, brick by brick. Tonight, as you lay still, you may imagine your own wall, each thought, a stone, each breath, the mortar. You are building peace, layer by layer, and when you dream of Etana, of hands lifting, of dust rising, of walls slowly growing. The builders sleep, now dot. It is full of movement, of growth, of stillness that breathes beneath every leaf. Babylon, mighty Babylon, may be remembered for its walls, its towers, its ziggurats rising toward the sky. But the soul of the city, the part that whispered most gently, lived in its gardens. This chapter walks slowly through those gardens. You do not need sandals. You do not need a name. You only need to breathe. There are many gardens in Babylon, private and public, sacred and simple. Some sit behind courtyards, their gates hidden. Others are vast, placed beside palaces or temples, open to all. And some rise, stacked high in stone terraces, reaching toward the heavens like living ladders. We begin not with the hanging gardens, not yet, but with a smaller one, a humble walled space near the Euphrates, where an old man named Sumu plants fig trees and talks to them like friends each morning. Just as the sun begins to stretch across the sky, Sumu kneels in the soil. His knees crack, his robe is dusty, but his hands are steady, sure. He tends to each plant with the care one might offer a child. "Good morning, my sweet fennel," he whispers. "You've grown again, haven't you?" In his garden there are rows of onions and garlic, vines of squash, beds of barley and lentils. Along the edges, herbs grow wild, basil, coriander, mint. Between them are flowers, not for trade or temple use, but simply because they are beautiful. Birds perch on the fig tree branches, watching. Lizards warm themselves on the sunlit stones. A stream trickles through the middle, barely a whisper. Yet it feeds everything here. When neighbors walk past, they nod respectfully, not because Sumu is powerful, but because his garden is in its silence. It teaches, grow, it says, and do it gently. A little further from the city's center, the royal gardens rise, the ones people later called wonders, not because they were vast, but because they seemed to float. Terraced stone levels, held by thick walls and columns, each layer bursting with greenery. These are the hanging gardens, though no one who lived in Babylon called them that. They simply called them the upper gardens, planted, perhaps, by a king who missed the mountains, or by a queen whose homeland was far away and dry. Water was pulled up in quiet rhythm, through pulleys and buckets, day after day, lifted from the river below. It flowed gently through carved channels, never flooding, never rushing, feeding palms, pines, pomegranates, myrtle, and date trees. Walking through these upper gardens was like walking through sky. A soft wind always moved through the leaves. Fruit hung low, heavy and sweet. Flowers peeked from vines wrapped around the columns. And underfoot, the coolness of stone reminded you that even dreams need foundations. People came here not just to admire, but to feel. A scholar sat beneath a fig tree, copying poems onto a clay tablet. A mother rocked her child to sleep near a bed of jasmine. A young couple whispered beside a pool filled with lilies. There was no noise, only nature's slow breath, only time folded into green. But gardens weren't only for kings. On rooftops, across Babylon, small planters grew herbs and vines. People carried clay pots to the top of their homes and filled them with whatever seeds they could find. Even in the smallest spaces between bricks, beside steps, in broken jugs, green things grew. Children helped water them with leftover cooking water. Old women plucked fresh mint for soup. Bees came, uninvited but welcomed. Butterflies landed, fluttered, moved on. Even in the dust, Babylon made room for color. The priests, too, had sacred gardens, not for beauty, not even for food, but for rituals. They grew tamarisk trees and frankincense. They sang over them during harvest. They believed that the gods watched these plants closely, and that how you treated a garden was how you treated the divine. In the evenings, the gardens glowed. The sun stretched golden fingers over every leaf. Shadows grew long and soft. The air cooled, carrying the scent of thyme and lemon balm. People wandered quietly. Some came to pray, not with words, but with presence. Some came to weep alone, where the trees could listen. Some came with no reason at all, only to sit, and the gardens welcomed all. There is something in green spaces that holds us gently. They do not demand, they do not chase. They simply offer a soft breeze, a bit of shade, a moment to remember that not all life must be fast or loud or brilliant. Sumu once said to a boy, "The garden grows when we don't shout. It listens best when we are still." And so we are still. Now, let yourself walk the paths of Babylon's gardens in your mind. Feel the warmth beneath your feet, the dappled sunlight on your shoulders, the brush of a vine against your hand. Smell the coriander, taste the fig, hear the bees humming like tiny lullabies. There is no war here, no worry, no wait, only growth, only green. Only peace. And when night falls, the garden sleeps too. The leaves rest, the flowers fold, the birds tuck their heads under wing. The water keeps flowing, soft, steady, faithful. Let your breath become that stream. Let your thoughts become the garden path. Let your heart, tired as it may be, settle gently into the soil. You are part of this earth. You are safe. You are growing even now. Sleep, child of Babylon. Sleep among the trees as the final traces of sunlight melt into the edges of the Euphrates. Babylon begins to quiet, not all at once, but gently, softly, as if the city itself exeshed. In the day, Babylon stood tall, loud, with footsteps, trade, voices, prayer. But at night, Babylon curled inward. It wrapped itself in starlight, in warmth, in rest, in dreams. And that is where we begin now. not at the palace, not in the temple, not even in the market, but above it all, on a rooftop, flat and still, warm from the day's sun. A family gathers there, as many do. The air is cooler now. A breeze moves lazily through the palms. Oil lamps glow in doorways below, flickering like little stars scattered along the streets. You can hear the faint murmur of people saying their final words to the day. A laugh, a sigh, a prayer, and above all this, the sky, deep and endless, ink dark, pierced with thousands of stars, each one whispering its own quiet light. The family has laid out mats. The children lie close together, their faces still flushed from the joy of running. Their mother hums a soft tune as she combs her fingers through her daughter's hair. The father drinks a warm cup of date milk, watching the stars like they are old friends. From the garden wall, a cat watches too, her eyes reflecting moonlight down below. The streets are nearly empty now. A late walker carries a basket covered in cloth. Two lovers hold hands near the canal. Somewhere far off, a shepherd whistles as he returns home. His goat's bells chime like lullabies. The great ziggurat, towering in the distance, casts its long shadow over the sleeping city. Even its priests, once busy with chants and rituals, now sleep on reed mats, their incense long burned out. The river moves gently. Always the Euphrates moves. It carries no urgency, only memory, and the city listens. Inside small homes, lamps are snuffed out. Children whisper their last questions of the day. Will it rain tomorrow? Can stars fall? Do dreams have doors? And mothers or fathers answer with patience or with stories, or sometimes with silence and a kiss on the forehead. In the healer's hut, her tools are cleaned, her herbs tied in bundles. She sleeps with her hand under her cheek, her brow peaceful. In the weaver's home, threads rest on wooden frames, untouched until morning. In the scribe's study, the last lines of a tablet have dried. He has rolled onto his side, the ink still faint on his fingers. Even the markets, once alive with color and smell and sound, are empty. Only the moonlight walks between the stalls now. Only the shadows of the awnings ripple in the wind. But in dreams, Babylon still dances. The children dream first of riding lions, of floating on clouds, of swimming through canals that sparkle like silver. Then the farmers dream of full harvests, of soft rains, of fields heavy with grain. Then the builders dream of arches that rise without strain, of bricks that stack themselves, of walls that hum with music. That the scholars dream of words that write themselves. The merchants dream of ships that sail while they sleep. And the old dream of things that once were, or might have been, or may still return in another life. Above them all, the stars burn bright, still, gentle, patient. They have watched Babylon sleep for centuries. They have watched its children become elders. Its bricks crumble, its songs fade, and still they shine without rush, without fear. They do not ask to be seen, they simply glow. And if you listen closely, closely enough to the silence of the night, you might hear the heartbeat of the city. It does not boom, it does not thud. It pulses like a cradle, rocking, soft, steady, kind. In this final moment, let yourself walk quietly through Babylon one last time. Your footsteps make no sound. You pass by closed doors and still gardens. You brush your hand along a warm wall. You look up and see a fig tree swaying in the breeze. The lamps have all gone out, but the city has not vanished. It only sleeps. It waits, like you, for morning, and now you too may rest. Let your thoughts settle like dust on a quiet shelf. Let your breath slow like the river. Let your dreams rise like the hanging gardens, climbing skyward, soft and alive. You are safe. You are loved. You are home. And Babylon is sleeping. And so, dear listener, are you? Sleep well. Good night.